got to start, I guess, with a little bit of an apology. That is, you've all just had lunch, you've all just been out in the fresh air, and now I've got about 120 slides that I'm going to share with you, so I apologise in advance. But in all seriousness, it's great to be here in Taupo. This is my second time coming to Taupo today, actually. This morning I flew over it, had a quick look around at the fog, flew back to Auckland and got my car and drove down. So it's taken a bit of effort. But it is great to be here, and I apologise on behalf of Kevin and Andrew that it's just me. So I'm going to give a little bit of an update on a few topics. Some of those are slide presentation that I've written, and some of them are a presentation that I haven't written. So if I stumble on a few of the points, please go easy on me. I'm going to kick off with a bit of a general update, and this was the update that Kevin was going to give this morning. It's more the general update on how things are going in general tourism and how things are going as we see it at Tourism New Zealand. So let's start with one of our key number slides in terms of the arrivals. Now the first slide you see here is our top 6 markets. I think everybody in the room would be pretty familiar with our 6 priority markets, pretty much, in fact, exactly ranked in order of number of arrivals. That's why they are our top 6 markets. And the really positive thing here is I think the whole industry is experiencing is you're seeing growth coming from all of those markets. So at a total level, our total arrivals into New Zealand are just over 10%. And the encouraging thing in that is that it's the holiday arrivals that's driving that growth. So it is tourism that is driving the growth of the arrivals. And on top of that, there are more people coming here on holiday, and they're staying here for longer during their visit. So you can see that in the holiday stay days. And a couple of countries one in particular that really stands out, has kind of been an ongoing conversation, and certainly in the last year that I've been with Tourism New Zealand, but China's growth continues to be very, very strong. So its latest numbers at 31% year-on-year arrival growth, so still a very strong growth. The new numbers are out, I believe, tomorrow, so that will go out well over 400,000 arrivals over the last 12 months. But what's also really encouraging is it's not just the top 6 markets that are growing. It's also the smaller markets, and there's some standout performers there actually. So if you look at the top of the table, this is the arrival numbers coming out of Korea, again driven by holiday arrivals, but back up to 75,000 arrivals coming into New Zealand, which is a pretty significant number and up significantly on a year ago. So we're seeing great performance out of that market. Singapore has exceeded 50,000 arrivals as well, also showing really strong growth. And some of the traditional markets such as France, Germany was on the previous slide, but it's encouraging to see those markets are really, post-GFC, are really getting some good growth in terms of arrival numbers into New Zealand. I'll talk a little bit later on about the emerging markets, so I won't touch on Indonesia, India, and Argentina, Brazil at this stage. The other thing that you've heard us talk a lot about, and you've certainly heard Kevin talk a lot about, is around really driving the shoulder arrivals as a key part of what we promote instead of peak arrivals. Naturally, we still want people to come here and peak, but we think the biggest opportunity as Tourism New Zealand to make an impact is to really drive the shoulder growth and flatten out that arrivals across the year as opposed to having one big peak and then a slow kind of rest of the year. The really encouraging thing over the last 12 months, so what you see there is the total arrival numbers in the middle, which shows that clearly the peak is still far and away the biggest period that people will arrive. But encouragingly, the growth percentage of the shoulder is faster than the growth of the peak. So it means we are making an impact. Naturally, that's not just Tourism New Zealand activity, it's the activity that everybody is doing as an industry, and there's a degree of it kind of also being pushed out by some capacity issues in some regions during the peak season. But we are seeing people deciding to travel also in other times of the year, which is very encouraging, particularly that autumn shoulder, up almost 20% arrivals on the year previous. And the other encouraging thing is that it's really being driven by the Tier 1 markets. So it's really our most important markets that are delivering that result. We're encouraging Chinese, Australians and Americans to travel also in the shoulder. So that's an encouraging result, and certainly what we'll continue to do for the foreseeable future is continue to promote the shoulder season as arrival time. Again, that doesn't mean we do not want people to come on the peak, as has been suggested by some media. It merely means where we think we can have the biggest impact as a National Tourism Board is by promoting the shoulder season, which in its simplest term means we start advertising earlier. So a couple of years ago we would start our advertising campaigns for New Zealand in September. We now start them in July. So that's at its simplest, we start to promote New Zealand, and we'll get more nuanced in that messaging as we go. February remains the busiest month, so this is year-on-year arrivals for the last 3 years. Again, you can see the peak still remains very much the peak, and February is the busiest month within that. A really important point, I think, in this, and for all of us in the room, is that whilst that's a big number, we welcomed more than 3 million people over the last year. Even in the biggest month of February, we have 127,000 visitors coming to New Zealand. That's still only 3 visitors for every 100 Kiwis. So I think that's a really important message. We get a little bit sometimes messaging around, are we too full, are we too full? Really, it means there are 3 visitors for every 100 New Zealanders during the busiest month of the year. So I think there's plenty of still upside in that regard. I'll talk a little bit about some of the marketing campaigns that are active at the moment, and this one's very recent. Hopefully some of you saw that over the last week or so. This in fact launched last week in Los Angeles. This is the latest movie from Disney called Pete's Dragon, which was entirely filmed here in New Zealand. Weta Workshop, I see Weta in the room. We're closely involved in this project as well. And we have I think a building legacy around film tourism, obviously off the back of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, which I'll talk a little bit about later as well. But we saw a great opportunity with this movie as well to use it as a way of leveraging travel and promoting travel to New Zealand. So I'll give a couple of examples of that. This went live last week in Los Angeles. Great media coverage in its first week. It'll launch, I think it goes out in cinemas the middle of next month here in New Zealand. And we're rolling that out kind of around the world as we go. And what's the objective of it? Is really confirm New Zealand is the home of Pete's Dragon. It's not as automatically obvious that the film was made here in New Zealand because it's made to look, so it was filmed in a little town called Tapanui in Otago, which was made out to look like a 1980s American town, which I've forgotten the name of. So it's not, and they all drive on the other side of the road. So it's not immediately obvious that it's in New Zealand. However, there is still a great opportunity through the New Zealand Film Commission, or with the New Zealand Film Commission. We've still had a great opportunity to kind of leverage the movie, to have access to the stars, which is the 2 biggest stars are Robert Redford and Bryce Dallas Howard, who are the kind of main characters. So we've had access to them, and we were able to use them in PR, which I'll give you a little example of. We put the content on newzealand.com, on our key site, and a lot of PR content around interviews and exclusive access to the stars of that movie. And we had a New Zealand press trip as well with media from those countries there, US, Canada, Brazil and Australia, that came into New Zealand, specifically visiting the locations where the movie was made. So it was filmed in Tapanui, as I said, that was the town, in the Red Forest, and Rotorua is where the main kind of forestry scenes are, and Weta Workshop is obviously closely associated on the production of it. So I'll give a couple of examples of how we've leveraged that activity. The first one is Dragon's Eye View, and then the second part is some interviews with the stars. content that we've been pushing out in America. We created it with the help of Where to Workshop. That is Elliot, by the way. Elliot is the dragon in Pete's Dragon. For those of you, well, you haven't seen the movie because it hasn't gone to cinemas here yet, but you'll see it when it comes out next month. So that's really that first step in tying in to make sure that people are aware that that movie is made here in New Zealand. So it's great for us to be able to get access to Disney's assets as well as Disney's marketing machine, actually. So last week at the premiere in Los Angeles, a representative from our team was on the red carpet being interviewed right alongside the stars also being interviewed about the movie and talking all about New Zealand and the great things to do in New Zealand. So it's, for a relatively low investment, is actually we can get great return because we dovetail off a fantastic marketing machine of Disney. The other thing that we do is we get access to the stars of the movie. So I mentioned Robert Redford and Bryce Dallas Howard as well as a couple of the young stars in the movie. So I'll give a little bit around, what I'll show now is some of the interviews that we did with those stars. And this is an opportunity, again, the value of PR. This is where they tell their own genuine stories of New Zealand. So this is where they can give their impressions, and then, and again, it flows on to their kind of network of followers. So it's about a minute and a half, I think, as well.
It's a movie really about, you know, asking you to believe in magic and that something magical is possible, and that's kind of how you feel when you're landing in New Zealand, where you're just like, I had no idea that I'd ever see anything this beautiful in my life.
Making the film was one thing, but experiencing New Zealand outside of the film was another, and I really loved it.
I mean, I personally really liked Wellington and Queenstown, because Queenstown is so scenic, and there's a lot of stuff to do, a lot of places to go, so much to do there, and like there's so many beautiful views, and yeah, New Zealand is such a special place. I'm so glad I got to go there. It was amazing.
And the fact that I was able to be in a helicopter, and we could go up to the glacier, we could go down into the valleys, we could go into the sea, was just mesmerizing. I just loved it.
The experience of being there is beautiful. I mean, the people, the weather, just, it's a magical, magical, magical country.
The lakes were so pure you could drink out of them. That was something.
I really liked Rotorua too, because it's kind of like the cultural center of New Zealand.
It's a country that is epic. You know, there's no other kind of way that I can describe it. And, you know, I mean, I think it's one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth.
They were their own words, I promise. But, and by the way, Disney's still in charge of the music, in case any of you were wondering. But all joking aside, it is great. This is where we can get the value, and this is, I think, where we work well with the New Zealand Film Commission. There's an incentive for the production studios to work with us. So it works for them, it works for us, and it's kind of money can't buy exposure. So we'll continue to drive that. But it's also, these sorts of movies don't come along every day, so when we get the opportunity, we really want to leverage them. All that material has gone out live in the US since last week. I'll talk a little bit about the major events that are coming up in 2017. It's a pretty big year ahead, actually. If you look at some activities just between now and July, actually the World Master Games, which is in April, expected numbers 25,000 athletes coming in. I know I saw Lauren here somewhere who's already looking nervous around that event, so I'm sure that'll be keeping her very busy as well. But that's going to be a large number of people coming into the country, and will also give us some good PR opportunities, I think, to leverage off the back of that. Again, we see this as vehicles and ways of talking about New Zealand, creating content to talk about New Zealand. And then obviously we have the Lions Tour coming up. Expected numbers, 20,000 international visitors off the back of that. The last visit was closer to 25,000, which was in 2004, 2005, if I'm not mistaken. So we are expecting around about that same, with 15,000 coming out of the UK. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brexit later on, but we're not seeing any indication that those numbers will be softer as a result of Brexit. So I don't think the Lions necessarily will be that affected by Brexit. So we're certainly expecting a bumper year out of UK arrivals off the back of that. And again, I think the Lions gives us a great opportunity on two fronts. We're working with the travel trade in the UK to encourage longer stays in New Zealand and to kind of premiumise their visit, you know, get more value out of their visit. At the same time, we see a great opportunity to use the tour to generate more PR back to the UK and Ireland and Wales to talk about to get more people to dream about coming to New Zealand. So it's a great opportunity. And then later in the year we've got Rugby League World Cup as well, which is another, actually quite a large number of people that have come off the back of that as well. The results to date, actually, so we've started actively around the New Zealand Lions series. Results to date already, we're getting some good EAV numbers in terms of people already starting to write. As we're less than a year out from the Lions tour, there's already the PR machine is working in terms of generating early stories around that upcoming visit, and some examples there. Next thing I want to talk a little bit about is our latest campaign that we have launched last month at the start of our new financial year. And here we have the opportunity to work with James Cameron. Those of you who don't know James Cameron, he is Hollywood's #1 director in terms of revenue earnings, I believe. He has made the top 3 blockbusters of all time with Titanic, Avatar, as well as a series of other movies such as The Terminator and the like. So he's actually Canadian by birth, but has got a kind of massive CV of movie making and is completely in love with New Zealand. So he has a house here in New Zealand in the Wairarapa, spends a lot of time here, and he bases his time half between here in New Zealand and in Los Angeles. And we worked with him at the start of the year, a somewhat challenging time of the year to film a commercial, because it was, I think, from the 4th to the 8th of January that we did the filming. So those of you that supported us with that, thanks in advance. Oh, thank you for that, because it was a difficult time to make that film. But that has now gone live around the world, and it was a great opportunity. Again, why is it a great story that we can tell with James Cameron? Is a couple of things. He is fairly well known in many parts of the world, certainly in America, and in other parts of the world, what he has made is really well known. So he is a superstar, if you like, in inverted commas. In some markets, we have to explain that he's the guy that made the Titanic and Avatar, and then they go, oh, okay, he's quite a big deal. The second part is that he has a really genuine love of New Zealand. So this is not somebody we've just paid to make a commercial with. This is somebody who's been incredible. Him and his wife Susie have been incredibly generous with their time, and has a genuine story to tell about New Zealand, and you can see that come through in the film, which I'll show you in a minute. And that is live now in China, UK, Germany. Those are performing. That's where the market's performing best. It's live in many other parts of the world. We launched in Indonesia a few weeks ago, together with the Prime Minister's visit, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And in October we'll be able to share, so for the road shows at the end of the year, we'll be able to share some of the results around that campaign, how it's been received. It tested well, so let me show you that commercial if you haven't seen it.
In high school, I took a bus to school, and I was always absorbed in a book, which took my mind to other worlds and satisfied this insatiable sense of curiosity that I had. It was all about trying to understand the world, understand the limits of possibility. And my, love of science fiction actually seemed to be mirrored in the world around me. Nature's imagination is so boundless compared to our own meager human imagination. Along the way in this journey of discovery, what are the lessons learned? Well, I think number one is curiosity. It's the most powerful thing you own. Thank you.
So that speech that you hear James Cameron giving in the background is his own speech that he gave at a TED talk a few years ago, talking about exploring. He is an explorer at heart. I think he's been to the deepest place in the earth, if I'm not mistaken, in a submarine. He is really a genuine explorer, so it kind of reinforces, again, inviting people to come and explore New Zealand. But what makes it a genuine story, again, as I said, is the fact that he really is in love with New Zealand since his first visit in the mid-90s. The other thing that I'm going to talk a little bit about during my 4 presentations rolled into one presenter anyway, is we continue to kind of evolve the technology we're working with. And one of the latest technologies that Facebook's got, so one of a couple of things that we've got is we have a global partnership deal with Facebook, and that works tremendously on both fronts. It works tremendously well for us because Facebook has a massive amount of subscribers and gives us incredible reach. And it means that we can be at the leading edge of new technology that Facebook is continually testing and evolving. It works really well for them because they can do it with us with a really credible brand, and then if it works they can expand it out to other parties that may well be interested in it. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win partnership that we have. And one of the things we have filmed earlier in the year, actually back in May, is around Facebook Canvas. Now Facebook Canvas has just launched. And you will see it in your Facebook feeds, is that it's a way of kind of really telling more of an immersive story as opposed to just having a film or just having a still image. It's a way of giving messages in between it. And I'll show you an example of some of that new material on the next slide. So I think I might need some technical help to... so here's one from the Bay of Islands. And you can tell kind of storytelling as the canvas rolls out. So it's not just a bit of still footage or a bit of film footage. You can put messages in between. You can kind of build almost an itinerary of the day, if you like, through that footage as it scrolls through your feed. So Facebook continues to be a critical partnership for us. And we'll continue to work closely with them around as they roll out. Clearly I haven't seen this slide before. I'll try it now. These guys, Facebook and Google, they never sit still. So they are constantly beavering away with new technology and new activities. And it's a great opportunity for New Zealand and for us to be so close to them so that we can test those new technologies as they roll them out. You get the idea. And then a click-through at the bottom which allows you to go through and again generate a referral to make that booking for your holiday. Another thing I want to talk about, which is going to be, I think, increasingly important for Tourism New Zealand, and I'm sure you'll agree, is I think as we're getting really good growth numbers coming into New Zealand, increasingly we want to see what we can do to help disperse those people around the country. And historically it has not been something that we've been that directly involved with to the extent that we've done touring itineraries. We've always encouraged people. We spend a lot of time on trying to get the value of visitors up and getting them to tour around the country, and the best way to do that is to get them to stay longer. So we're always encouraging people to stay longer because we know the longer you stay, the more regions you'll visit. We're doing a test at the moment, which is working in China, specifically with the China travel sellers, to encourage them to go beyond the beyond the traditional hotspots, if you like. So WTMN is a new acronym for Wellington, Tasman, Marlborough, Nelson, and we're working with those RTOs to go, how can we actually actively move traffic as well as the hotspots, but into those regions? And why are we testing it? And why we're doing it in that regions may well be questions that we've already received is for two reasons. One, we think that area or amalgamation gives a good variety for people visiting New Zealand. So it gives a good variety of urban as well as scenery as well as activities. So we think it kind of encapsulates that. And so that's key. And the other thing is that we think now is a really good opportunity to kind of test how can we influence people to move their itineraries around the country as opposed to just visiting the hotspots. This will, I think, become more and more important as we go into the next 4 years. By the way, this is not an idea to get people to move to not go to the hotspots, but this is actually to add on to their itineraries, I think. So we will have some results for that for the road shows at the end of the year to let you know where we're working on that. We're particularly working around itineraries and some of those packages to drive people to those regions, although that image is incorrect. But, so we are working with the travel sellers in China to see if we can move people also more actively to certain regions in the country. Brexit, I think that was Kevin's last or almost last slide, just a slide on Brexit. Really, it's a little too early to say. What we hear on the ground and talking to travel trade in the UK is that it's a little too early to tell what the impact is. We're not seeing any direct impact. Obviously the currency, the pound is devalued, so there may well be some impact. There are some forecasts that are saying it's going to be slower in 2017. I think we'll have a little bit of a buffer with the Lions Tour because we're not expecting much impact on the Lions Tour due to Brexit. I think those who want to come and follow the Lions will come and follow the Lions, and they have probably already committed to following the Lions. So I don't think we'll see an impact. We will keep a close eye. We're not seeing any impact in the rest of Europe, so we're not seeing any impact in Germany either, or France in terms of travel trade telling us that we're seeing a... I don't know if you guys in the room are getting any of those messages, but probably a little too early to tell, and still fairly uncertain in terms of what is going to happen with Brexit and when it's actually going to be activated and initiated. For those of you not aware, we work on a 4-year planning cycle as Tourism New Zealand, so MB funds us 100% with our 115 million annual budget. We are coming to we're in the 4th year of that 4-year cycle, so at the end of this year and going into next year we will start to present our plans, how we see for the next 4 years. There's a number of phases in that, and we're in the kind of collecting information phase at the moment. We've sent out surveys, we've talked to VIPs in the industry, and we're involving, obviously our board is closely involved with this process as well. We have a number of workshops in the coming months where we look at what we plan to pitch to the government for the next 4 years, and there's the kind of timings there, so that by February, March we should have our business plan for next year complete and a view on what the next 4 years look like. What is the top line message, and probably particularly important with Kevin actually going on to Frucor, going on to something else, is the direction we're setting is very much keep doing what we're doing. We think we're getting great results as an industry. I think we will want to play a more active role in helping to disperse visitors around the country more. Whereas in the last 4 years, it's more about encouraging people to stay longer and then they'll travel to more regions. We will look to play a more active role in how we can disperse people around the country and encourage people to travel around the country. It'll still be about value. It'll still be about shoulder. So we're not, it's certainly we'll be pitching a continuity of the current plan and continue to evolve as we go. So where to from here? Clearly these are not my slides, but maybe this is a point. Maybe this is a point to say that I'll take any sponsorship pitches on behalf of Kevin, and probably accept all of them for any sponsorship proposals for V. He gave me full authority to agree to all deals. Just a quick summary. Demand for travel for New Zealand remains strong and broad-based. You saw that at the start from all the markets. We're seeing good growth numbers. Small, medium and large markets, mature and emerging markets, which is really positive. We expect that to continue for the next, I mean, you know, it's a crystal ball looking much beyond 2 to 3 years, but certainly bar any major issues, we would expect that to continue. There's nothing to suggest a softening of the tourism market in the foreseeable future. Brexit could have some repercussions, but too early to tell, so we will keep an eye. You know, China or Asia is becoming a bigger part of our mix, and especially China. And I think, and that will continue to accelerate. There's nothing to suggest that we would see that decelerating. Having said that, the Chinese are big spenders, but are here for less time. Hence our project to also go, can we encourage travel to other parts of New Zealand beyond the hotspots? In the very near term, we have a tremendous opportunity in the Americas, and particularly in the US, with United and American Airlines just starting and restarting flights direct to New Zealand last month. The numbers aren't out yet, but we expect July to have been a very strong July versus a year ago, driven somewhat by those new airlines flying, and obviously together with Air New Zealand as well, and their capacity increases. So we see a great opportunity for those connections, and an opportunity for us to access other parts of the United States with the likes of American Airlines with their network. And we really continue to be focused on driving visitor value. This is not a numbers game, although at the start I did talk about the number of people arriving into the country. Our focus very much is about increasing the value of visitors into New Zealand, not just the numbers game. So that will remain very much a focus. The encouraging thing is that the value of the arrivals is growing at twice the rate as the number of the arrivals. And also increasing off-peak demand, as I talked about. Thanks and farewell from Kevin, that is. I don't think I'm going anywhere. So 1 from 4, guys, 25% of the way there. So I will kick on if you don't mind. I think I might accelerate a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about digital. For us in marketing New Zealand and promoting New Zealand, digital remains our primary channel. And why is that? Because it's far and away the most cost effective. So we can target much better in digital. We can target people that are actively considering New Zealand based on what they do online. We can target them quite specifically. And once they interact with us once on one of their messages, then we can retarget them with another message. So we send them a dreaming message, have you thought about New Zealand? If they click on it, watch it, then we send them a, have you thought about New Zealand in the autumn? Have you thought about visiting these locations? And the last one is a book now opportunity. So it's a very specific reason why we work with digital, and it just gives us better reach and better impact. And engagement's kind of accelerating in that field. You will see much more mobile and video activity, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. NewZealand.com, big successful results in the last financial year, which I'll talk about. And user-generated content. We think we have a competitive advantage around New Zealand, around user-generated content, because actually everywhere you look, it's beautiful. So people generating their own content about New Zealand is really kind of accelerating as well. All-time high, 30 million visitors to NewZealand.com, which is great. So we're seeing great growth in the site and people accessing it for information about New Zealand. This is an example. Hopefully you're all reasonably familiar with NewZealand.com, but these are an example of the listings and the search opportunities as well, where you search for activities, accommodation, etc. What's the main reason people go to NewZealand.com? Is to look for things to do, which is not that surprising really. Things to see and do, to get an overview of New Zealand, to find transport and accommodation, and to get information on a specific location. But it is a great search engine for people searching what it is they want to do. As I said, 33 million visits, 2.9 million referrals in terms of referrals through to businesses. And you can see that the top 3 markets also have the top number of visits to NewZealand.com. This NewZealand.com is very important to us because it's our biggest owned asset. We spend quite a lot of money on NewZealand.com, continually, a lot at the front, but a lot at the back as well, making sure that it's user-friendly, the data gets refreshed. So do make sure you keep sending us your listings, your activity updates. That all goes on NewZealand.com. In the last 12 months, we've completely revamped the site to make it mobile first. So that chart there shows the number of people accessing NewZealand.com via mobile. So that's the big blue blob. So 60% now are accessing NewZealand.com on mobile versus 4 years ago it was 10%. That will continue. So that's why we've made the whole site completely mobile friendly. It used to be quite heavy to load on your phone, on your tablet. Now it's built modularly, which means it loads quicker, essentially. It's all about speed and ease of use that we focus on around NewZealand.com. You'll notice I have accelerated slightly to make sure that we keep everybody awake and attentive. Image-led storytelling. So this is the other one. I think as we've gotten better and better around digital marketing, so a couple of key takeouts, also for your own sites, is the thing around mobile first. I encourage you to do that if you haven't already for your own online activity. There are less and less people accessing that information from their desktop. So having it mobile first really is to be encouraged. The other is we very much lead with imagery. Whether it's still or moving, it is all about storytelling and getting people to dream and then lead into hopefully planning a booking for New Zealand. But picture speaks 1,000 words, so we use imagery around that a lot and as few words as possible. I'll click through some of the other assets that we utilise around the world. Facebook, we've got 2.2 million fans. Instagram, Weibo, which is the Chinese version, Twitter and WeChat. We have a growing fan base on those platforms as well, so continue to work with them. And the user-generated content I mentioned, and it is really tremendous. It is content that you can get for free, which is always good. We obviously spend a little bit of money around, with the photography and the footage that we develop to make sure that we get great content, but we're getting better and better content from people that just generate it themselves and want to share. And we get sent a lot of stuff day in, day out about great holiday shots, which is essentially free advertising for New Zealand. So we just give them a platform for people to be able to share that with their friends and broader community. Similarly with hashtag New Zealand Must Do is also a platform for people to talk about their New Zealand experiences. So all of these things, a bit like the PR stories, is a way for people to tell their own genuine stories as opposed to it just feeling like it's advertising. And this is around newzealand.com, our digital content hubs. We find that we're attracting really high quality international visitors. So those 30 million visitors seem to be quite purposeful when they come to our site. Generates 3 million referrals at this stage. We will continue to see that grow, I think, as we see the visitor numbers grow, but more importantly actually the referrals off the site. So that the referrals are people that are going on to your businesses or to your sites to actually look at making bookings. So we see that growing as well. And that was the last slide. So we're halfway. I've ripped through that one rather quickly, actually. But look, in all seriousness, I think we have the slides available anyway for after the conference, Leslie, if I'm not mistaken. But we'll have some questions at the end as well if anybody wants to cover that off, or I'll be here tonight, tomorrow morning, so any other questions follow up, please don't hesitate to come and ask. I'll talk a little bit about special interests. So we have a couple of special interests that we're focused on as Tourism New Zealand, specifically around, at this stage, around cycling and golf. And why do we do that is because we're seeing the visitation around special interests and the spend growing, and generally it grows ahead of the total market. Quite often they will come counter-seasonal, so they'll also come in the shoulder seasons for their travel, and quite often they will disperse around the country. So it makes sense for that from that point of view. As I say, our focus is around cycling and golf, and particularly in Australia, the cycling campaign has been launched leading into last spring. I'll show that for those of you that haven't seen it. And again, going into the autumn, we've launched the campaign using an influencer called Megan Gale, which I'll show that film if you haven't seen that. And we have a number of high impact golf events coming in the next 18 months, which we will look to leverage around our golf platform as well. Some data slides, which I won't bombard you with, but the good news is that what we're seeing from the IVS data, this is from March because the new IVS data is due, I think, at the end of this week actually. This shows that golf and cycling participation in New Zealand has grown from international visitors, plus 26 and 18%, and their spend has also grown. So that means more people are coming here for cycling and golf, and they're spending more money while they're doing it. So that's good news. The newzealand.com performance, so again, people searching for cycling or golf holidays, we can see growth in many parts. So if you look at a global level, the number of visitors have grown. In the US, the number of visitors have grown. Active visits, so those are people not just looking at the site, but actually clicking on the content, viewing the content. And then referrals off the back of it are growing, particularly in the US and Australia, particularly for cycling. What we're seeing for golf is actually slightly less visits. The plus side is that the ones that are visiting, there's a real growth in referral. So the pass-on rate of the people that are visiting for golf is increasing. But we're looking into that, what we need to do around the golf proposition for New Zealand to make it resonate better in these markets. This year we've reviewed our strategy around special interest, specifically for cycle. We've updated kind of the look and feel, the brand tohus. We've completed cycle trail videos with voiceover explaining what there is to see and do at the cycle trails, and we've got 14 of the trails completed. We've got new cycle trail guides that have been completed and distributed. And our mountain bike content was created to leverage Crankworks earlier in the year as well. So that was specifically in the US and Australia, which we see as the biggest kind of opportunity markets for cycling. And we've also, we're continually kind of renewing our activity and how it looks on newzealand.com to make sure that the information's up to date, easy to access, and really shows people what there is to see and do in New Zealand around those special interests. Updated the golf courses brochure and the New Zealand Cycling Guide and Golf Guide, which we've done in partnership with AA as well. So just continually upgrading that content around the special interest. Which leads me into a little film, which is probably quite good timing. I will show, for those of you that haven't seen it, we worked with Megan Gale, who is an Australian influencer. She's originally a Kiwi, although she's lived in Australia for a long time. And we filmed some footage for her discovering kind of cycling in New Zealand. We launched this in Australia, so I'll show you how that material looks.
Under the sun, put the corn up into the sky. I'll take you one by one. Come on and take me on. 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 When the war is over, the fight is done, I'll be lying in the sun. The fight is done, we'll be lying in the sun. Yeah, when the war is over, the fight is done, we'll be lying in the sun.
Okay, so if I had written this presentation, I would have shown you the Megan Gale film. But clearly I did not write this presentation, so that was not the Megan Gale film. That's in fact our new film, highlighting to people all the things there are to see and do around the cycling trails in New Zealand. Please Google Megan Gale Cycling New Zealand and you will get that footage I was talking about, which was a campaign we had last year. We will be using that again, all joking aside though, that's great. We've got Megan locked up, as it were, for the rest of this year. So she resonated really well with in Australia because she has a strong Australian connection but also a strong New Zealand connection. And we filmed some footage with her last year as she's exploring the cycle trails in New Zealand, exploring her Maori heritage as well, and travelling around New Zealand. That resonated really well in the Australian market, so we'll be using that as well. I'm going to click through some of the activities that are in development. So we've got some new global cycling content that's in development now. So we're looking at inspiring more cyclists to visit. At the moment we've been quite focused on Australia and in the US, but there are plenty of people who will come here on holiday and would consider cycling as part of that itinerary. So we want to have some more broader dreaming cycling work that we're developing on at the moment. We're developing an Australia Autumn Cycling campaign and really working with trade partnerships. So we're looking in Australia to work a little more focused with trade partnerships to unlock cycling opportunities in New Zealand. So that could be the likes of cycle shops, a little more specialised in the cycling world, if you like, in Australia, to really see how we can leverage their network of members and their network of people to consider New Zealand as a cycling holiday. So it also gives us an opportunity to be quite targeted in activity. There's a hell of a lot of cyclists in Australia. We're just across the ditch, so we think it's a great opportunity to unlock people coming here to visit for that holiday. We'll continue leveraging big events such as Crankworks, Pioneer and the Cycle Challenge. So I think that gives us great content, adrenaline content around cycling in New Zealand, and we've got all the proof points with the cycle trails and the many activities around. And as I said earlier, point 8 there, we will look at the 3 major golf events coming up in 2017 to really leverage those and raise the profile of golfing holidays to New Zealand. I'll touch a little bit on film tourism. I can see Russell in the room, so this should be close to your heart. But really, why are we involved in film tourism is because there was a survey done by HBO last year which said that 1 in 4 adults choose a holiday based on a TV show or a movie. So it is a great kind of influencer or a motivator in terms of visiting New Zealand. There's research, that's why The Sound of Music, there's research that still 50% of people visiting Austria visit because of The Sound of Music. And that movie was made 50 years ago. A lot of 50s. But what that says to us actually is that The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings has many, many, many more years left of leverage. There are still many people in the world that haven't seen those movies. And it's a great opportunity for us to continue to work the kind of the legacy of The Hobbit. It's the 15th year, this year I believe, of the making of the first Hobbit. So we see great opportunity to really continue the legacy of 100% Middle-earth. And yeah, as I said, 15 years since we made it. So we know from our own research that 18% of visitors to New Zealand cite The Hobbit as the reason for their initial interest in New Zealand. 18% of holiday arrivals, so that's almost 300,000 people cite The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings as a reason for considering a visit to New Zealand. So we will continue to always talk about The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings because I think it's such a great fit with New Zealand and there is still plenty of gas left in the tank. And obviously experiences like Hobbiton continue to see phenomenal growth and great investment in that property. So you get an enormous visitor growth, which is tremendous to see. And what's our point of difference when we talk about film tourism? Because I mentioned Pete's Dragon earlier. What's our point of difference is it's a little bit in this picture. So this is what you get on the right-hand side is if you go to a film studio in the US, in Los Angeles. You're behind a rope, you're in a train, you're probably listening to a pre-recorded message about what you're seeing, and you get flicked through the souvenir shop at the end. Whereas in New Zealand, you get a much more behind the ropes look. You get a much more immersive look into where the movie was made. Obviously, you get to visit attractions around it as well, but it's a much more being part of the scenery, being part of where the movie was shot. So it's very much about fantasy as reality. And that's how we leverage Pete's Dragon as well, around really seeing where the movies are made. And we find that there are two types of visitors. There are those that really cite the movie as a reason and are aware of the movie, and that's a kind of a reason for visiting, and they'll look at some of those locations where the movie was made. And then you have the really avid fans who will want to go to all of the places, who will want to experience all of the experiences that go through it. But it has broad appeal as well as it has more niche appeal in terms of the really avid fans that want to come to New Zealand because of the movie that was made here. So we see great opportunity to continue to leverage that. And really kind of cementing New Zealand as the kind of the home of Middle-earth. That's still a key message about what we drive about New Zealand, because still lots of people that you meet around the world, you say that you work for Tourism New Zealand or you're from New Zealand, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit is pretty much still one of the first thing that comes kind of top of mind, which is great. And grow preference to travel to New Zealand through looking for new film opportunities. So that's really our plan, is we will continue to cement the home of Middle-earth and look for new opportunities such as Pete's Dragon, which I talked about a little earlier today. There's another slide on Pete's Dragon. I think we've covered... we haven't covered Pete's Dragon. We haven't covered Pete's Dragon because this one, I think... You see, we really synthesized our presentations very well. This is the last one so this is actually the trailer for Pete's Dragon, which has been running.
Travels in this town. How long has he been out there?
6 years.
You don't survive in a forest for 6 years alone.
He says he wasn't alone.
In the States have been really positive, and it's great to see that New Zealand is certainly part of that message. So if you go on and Google Pete's Dragon in the US, you'll see quite a lot of exposure around the movie because, again, you get the machine of Disney, but you also get quite a lot of messaging around New Zealand, which is great. So we're managing to really get our message in there that the movie was made here and around those great locations. How are we doing? Good. So we are now on to 4 of 4. I promise I will not bring a 5th presentation to the mix. The good news is this is the presentation that I wrote, so I should know what's coming in advance. Look, I'm going to talk a little bit about emerging markets, only a dozen or so slides. I just want to give you guys a bit of an update on what we do in the emerging markets. So when we talk about the emerging markets, I mentioned that there are kind of priority 1, 2 and 3 markets and then the emerging markets. For us, that's really India, Indonesia, Latin America. When I say Latin America, it's really Argentina and Brazil. That's our focus area, is Argentina and Brazil. And I've got a couple of slides on each of those markets just to give you a bit of an update. We also build our own office infrastructure. So for those of you less familiar with Tourism New Zealand, we're a relatively small organisation. That is, we're 160 people in our total employee base, but we operate 15 offices in 14 countries. So we have 2 offices in New Zealand, Auckland and Wellington, and then we have lots of outposts. Many of you have been to many of those offices, but the biggest of which would be Shanghai, which is about 15 people, and the smallest would be Korea, which is 2. So we have, and we base those offices in market, obviously around the markets that we focus on. Hence, we have an office in Jakarta, we have an office in Mumbai, and we have an office in Sao Paulo in Brazil. I know we talked about the major markets before, the big markets, so I'll talk a little bit about the emerging markets. The good news is we're seeing some good growth. We have operated in India for a number of years, and it is a challenging market. The number is inching up, total arrivals close to 50,000, of which half are holiday arrivals, so we're seeing some pretty good growth out of that, almost 20%. The biggest kick-up historically that we had of visitors coming to New Zealand out of India was obviously around Cricket World Cup, which was well leveraged and was a great opportunity for people to explore New Zealand. And we're seeing, holiday arrivals is leading the charge, 22% growth in holiday arrivals, and they're staying for longer. Indonesia, smaller numbers, we are seeing some growth. I'll talk a little bit about Indonesia. It's probably a step behind India, if you like. We've reopened our office in Indonesia a few years ago, so we're kind of re-establishing to some degree there, but we are seeing some good inroads. Brazil and Argentina is really the story of two different economies in 2 different countries. One goes up, the other goes down, seems to be a little bit the case. Brazil's economy is in reasonably unstable state. They're still in the process of impeaching their president. So there's a lot of instability in Brazil, which makes operating in that market quite tough. At the same time, Argentina is seeing great results And a big driver of that is Air New Zealand's direct route between Auckland and Buenos Aires, and we work very closely with them on that, so that's tremendous to see the results of that. But Brazil is it's a longer term play, and I think it makes sense for us as a destination. It's a big population base, there's increasing wealth, there's increasing middle class. It's probably going to be it's a longer term play in terms of where we will see the visitor numbers come up out of that market. And I've got the Philippines in there as well, because that's we're kind of waiting for better air links to the Philippines again with Air New Zealand, and we're poised and ready to support in that. Look, this bubble chart is really what this shows is the relative size and the growth rate. So it shows Australia is very big, but growing less fast. China is reasonably big and growing very fast. But actually the point I wanted to make is that whilst emerging markets are relatively small, when you roll them up together, they do show relatively high growth rates. So that's why we forward invest in those markets, if you like, for future growth. I'll spend a little bit of time on each of the markets. India, I won't dwell too long on these slides. Why do we operate in India? And what are some of the results? We see about half of the arrivals are holiday arrivals. Almost 30% are VFR, which also has some value. But obviously our focus very much on holiday arrivals. You can see the growth numbers on the right-hand side in terms of total and holiday arrivals over the last kind of 6 or 7 years, which is quite good. The other reason we focus on India is they have a natural travel period as well as the peak. So their second peak is April-May, is their natural holiday period. So that's another reason, apart from the fact that it's a big population base, there's an emerging middle class, there's an increasing interest in travel, all of those key factors. It's also that they have a natural travel period on top of or instead of the peak, which makes it another appealing factor for us. Probably the biggest activities we've done in India, certainly over the last 12 months, is we worked with a guy called Siddharth Malhotra. Now he is an up-and-coming Bollywood star from India, and we've worked with him. We brought him over almost a year ago, actually about October last year, to do an action-packed kind of 8 days itinerary of New Zealand, and I'll show you some of the footage around that. And he's our tourism ambassador in India. Why have we worked with him? For a number of reasons. Bollywood is, apart from cricket, a massive passion point in India. Secondly, he did, when we started working with him, he had his own social media followers of about 2.5 million. The good news is he's now got about 4.5 million social media followers. So part of how we work with him is he also accesses his network and talks about how great it is to travel in New Zealand. We researched him, and when we looked at active considerers people who are considering coming to New Zealand, we found that 86% of them knew who this guy was. So that's the first one tick, is if you're going to work with an ambassador, best to work with one that people know. Secondly is, this was post, we tested him beforehand, what people thought of him. Then afterwards we tested the campaign. We found that, coincidentally, 86% of active considerers also recognised his campaign. So they recognised him and they saw the campaigns that he's in. But more interesting out of that is 2/3 of people who saw it were more interested in travelling to New Zealand as a result. So it is about trying to get people through the funnel and getting closer to actually planning a holiday and booking a holiday. So it's not just creating noise, it is about, we want people to be more active in terms of considering a holiday to New Zealand. And we did a number of activities with him whilst he was here, and I'll highlight one of these, which was quite a nice activity he did during his visit.
Whiskey, just give me information.
clearly trying to utilise the second passion point of cricket in that footage. But the good news is that as an activity alone, it generated about $5.5 million of EAV. So that's if you paid for that advertising, it would cost you about $5.5 million in terms of buying the spots in the newspapers and the TV, etc., etc. So, but more importantly to that, it's not just about making noise. It's actually that the people who saw it, again, 2/3. 67% were more motivated to travel to New Zealand. So it's actually, and that's just one example of a piece of footage. So what are we doing differently in 2017 or FY17? Those of you who were at Trends earlier the year would have in May would have seen would have heard the Prime Minister announce that the government has put some additional funds into tourism for this financial year. That's gone into India and into the United States. And in India, what we're going to do with those increased funds is two things. In particular, we are focused on unlocking Delhi. At the moment, we have our office and our resource somewhat pointed towards Mumbai. Don't forget, these are pretty significant sized cities in India with an overall massive population base, but the cities in their own right are pretty significant. We did some further research earlier in the year and found that they really are obviously quite separate cities, but the ways that they work, the way the travel trade is structured, the way that the people think about travel, book travel. So we will put an additional trade resource. They will be based out of the Mumbai office, but they will spend a hell of a lot of time in Delhi trying to unlock the Delhi travel trade as well to encourage more booking out of Delhi into New Zealand. The second thing we will do is we will increase our promotion for that second peak. So previously, we marketed coming in the spring shoulder of September, October. We will put additional funds into also marketing the kind of natural second peak that you can see there, which is April and May. So really encourage. So we will see increased advertising around travelling to New Zealand for those periods of the year. And we have big. We continue to be very bullish about India. It will take some time. We're hopeful for more air capacity, more air links out of India. See Jenny in the crowd, so just that one's for you. But we do think there's a great opportunity for India as a growth market. Indonesia, just quickly, a couple of others, I'll give you the summary. Good news with Indonesia, smaller numbers, but it's pretty much all holiday arrivals. There was a little bit of VFR, but predominantly holiday arrivals. The other thing, so you can see good growth, pretty small base, 18,000 total, 12,000 arrivals. We still think there's a great opportunity. The other thing you see is Lebaran is the biggest peak out of Indonesia, so that's July. It moves every year by about 2 weeks, but it'll be backwards, so it'll be a long time before it hits February, January, but it does move every 2 weeks, but it means that is their biggest peak of the year for travel, so that's another reason why Indonesia is an attractive market, we believe. And really it's about building demand for future air links. At the moment, there's only indirect opportunities. We work with Garuda and with Singapore Airlines to see how we can unlock easier ways of getting into New Zealand. We also work with a brand ambassador called Joe Taslim, who is not a Bollywood star, but a Hollywood star. He's been in the Fast and Furious franchise, and he's quite well known in Indonesia. So we've worked with him for a few years and continue to do joint venture campaigns in that market as well. But this is India, we think, is the bigger opportunity. Indonesia, we have a 4-person office in Indonesia as well. And we really want to ramp up our game in Indonesia a bit. So during the Prime Minister's visit last month, we took that opportunity to launch James Cameron campaign in Indonesia as part of the global campaign. And it's great to be able to use the Prime Minister as the Minister of Tourism to get that message, because we've got quite a lot of PR off the back of that launch announcement in the middle of July. And I think I've talked about most of those points. The other area is business events and incentive travel. We do quite a bit of activity in Indonesia as well. Look, Latin America, I don't think we'll need to spend too much time on. I think we're very focused and we're very much in support of the direct flight Buenos Aires, Auckland, and we think it's a great opportunity for that region. It is volatile. There is volatility, but the good thing is as one goes up, the other goes down, so it does seem to counter each other, but we're seeing great results, early results out of Argentina, very encouraging to see great results from Air New Zealand out of Argentina. Brazil is a bit unstable at the moment. They've got some currency issues and some impeachment issues, but we remain committed to that region as well for future opportunities. And here's a kind of a snapshot of some of those activities, really around in particular launching the new link where we've worked together, as I said, with Air New Zealand. And we also work PR. We do want people, what we find in these, certainly in Latin America, it's really a start market, so we really have to start right at the beginning. And one of the great insights was with a meeting we had with Air New Zealand there was that a lot of people in Argentina and Brazil actually think that New Zealand is 30 hours away, because they think they have to go up to Los Angeles and then across. So one of the first things we do together with them is to go, well, actually it's just as close as Madrid, which seems to resonate quite well in that part of the world. So really getting the basics. Actually it's one flight and it's no further than Europe. Getting that message across, getting the basics of what there is to see and do, and building some of that PR around building appeal for the country. We're working at the moment with quite a prominent travel show in Brazil, and trying to get them to film their entire series, their eight program series in New Zealand. So more news to follow on that, but hopefully we'll be able to announce that certainly at the roadshows or before. Last slide, I promise. Last slide, 4 out of 4. The Philippines. What we're doing with the Philippines is really more of the basics, really, is educating the trade, targeting some of the key travel sellers in Manila and the Philippines, getting them to understand the basics of travel to New Zealand. We will continue to do that. We really await the direct air links when we can do that, and we'll put in more support into that market. It is, again, another great market, big population base, emerging middle class, increasing ability to travel. So all of those things will kind of are a good potential for the future. We firmly believe that we should be looking at a portfolio of markets, not too many, not too few. So we have some big markets, Australia, US, China. We have some kind of medium markets and more traditional markets, if you like, with Japan, UK, Germany. And these are really the emerging markets. So whilst we kind of semi-over-invest at this stage, we're forward investing, we do think it's important for future growth opportunities, because like any business, we don't want to be too reliant on one or two customers. And that is that.